Eh? Tere? Eh? Welcome to Go to Sleep, Historian, your quiet corner of soft history made for winding down. Before we begin tonight's long winter walk, feel free only if you truly wish to subscribe. Gently like the video, and perhaps leave a comment telling us where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, settle in, dim the lights, let your breath slow just a little, and allow yourself to drift deeper into the past. The story begins on a night so cold it feels as though the world itself is holding its breath. Not far from the edge of a forest, under a sky sharpened by winter, a lone traveler approaches a medieval English village. Frost, thick as powdered glass, coats every surface. Every branch glitters with moonlit ice, and each exhale from the traveler curls into the air like pale smoke before dissolving into the dark. The traveler pauses at the crest of a small hill. Below lies a cluster of thatched cottages, their shapes softened beneath blankets of snow. Thin threads of chimney smoke rise slowly stubborn, struggling, but steady against the iron-colored night sky. The village seems suspended in a deep quiet, the kind of quiet that comes only when temperatures fall far below what the body truly welcomes. He takes a slow breath. The air bites at his lips. His eyelashes stiffen almost instantly. The cold settles around him like a living creature, nudging him forward, urging him toward the faint glow of human warmth below. A path narrow, half hidden beneath crusted snow winds toward the village gate. His boots press into it with soft crunches, each step echoing quietly. The pathway, though simple, tells a story. It is beaten down by countless footsteps. Farmers returning from frozen fields, children running with red cheeks in the early dusk, and families carrying firewood before the cold swallowed the last of the daylight. Tonight, however, the path is empty. As he approaches the first cottage, the air grows even stiller. Snow drifts lightly in a slow dance around him, and the only sound is the faint groaning of ice expanding in the river nearby. A wooden fence leans under the weight of frost. He brushes a gloved hand along one of its rails, feeling the brittle cold run through the wood. A thin glow flickers behind a shuttered window. The traveler pauses, listening. Somewhere inside, a fire crackles faintly weak, but persistent. It is the sound of survival, the sound of a family doing everything they can to keep the cold from sinking into their bones. He continues down the narrow lane. Every cottage looks like a small island of faint warmth in an ocean of frozen quiet. Icicles cling to thatched roofs like rows of polished glass. The window shutters rattle now and then, whenever a burst of midnight wind rolls through the village. Straw stuffed into the joints of doors hints at the villagers' constant battle against drafts. The traveler knows this place well enough to understand what waits inside these homes. Anxious families clustered near fires, heavy wool layers wrapped tightly around them, the last logs carefully saved for the deepest hours of night. But tonight, he is not here for warmth. He is here to remember, to understand, to witness how people endured a world where winter was a true adversary, one that quietly tested every household, every breath, every night. He walks further into the heart of the village. The cold thickens, pressing against him with the stubborn weight of a clenched fist. His breath turns white and swirls around his face. The darkness above feels endless, stretching so high that the stars look like silver pins pressed into black cloth. Somewhere in the distance, a lone dog gives a muffled bark, then falls silent. The traveler's boots leave deep prints in the snow, and for a moment, he imagines them being buried by the wind, within menacing arrest by nature's quiet insistence. Ahead stands the old well, its stone rim coated with ice. Beside it, a wooden bucket hangs frozen in place. A thin crust of frost covers its rope like sugar. He runs a hand gently across the cold stone. Even this well, so central to life, feels subdued by winter's grip. Not far from the well, the traveler notices a lantern glowing inside a cottage with crooked beams. Against the faint orange light, he sees the silhouette of a woman checking her firewood pile. Her movements are slow and deliberate, tinged by worry. Firewood has become precious more valuable than coins when nights drop this low. Her breath fogs the window from inside, and she wipes it with her sleeve to peer out into the night. For a brief moment, her eyes meet the shadows outside, but she sees nothing but the dark. She turns away again, tending to the embers with careful hands. The traveler continues forward. He feels the stories of each home in the air. Small dramas of survival, whispered prayers to morning light, children tucked beneath layers of wool, and adults silently hoping the fire holds out. Winter shapes every corner of the village, not only the cold, but the behavior, routine, and instinct of its people. A sharp gust sweeps down the lane. The traveler steps aside as the wind sprays fine grains of snow against the side of a cottage. The shutters rattle once more. A horse in a nearby stall shifts and releases a soft, uneasy snort. Further along stands a tiny shrine by an old oak. In warmer seasons, villagers leave sprigs of herbs or tokens for good fortune. But now, it sits silent beneath a mound of snow, its offerings frozen and brittle beneath ice. Even superstition sleeps lightly under winter's weight. The traveler reaches the center of the village, where several cottages face a small, open space. Here, the snow is trampled, a sign that families gathered earlier in the day to trade news, bring in hay, or check on each other's well-being. Now, though, the square is silent, yet the silence tells its own story. Inside these homes, the village breathes in unison. Fires crackle, blankets rustle, heavy wool shifts as tired bodies curl inward to conserve heat. Somewhere, a baby whimpers and is gently hushed. Somewhere else, someone stirs the embers one last time before letting darkness settle. The traveler closes his eyes for just a moment. In that stillness, the village feels alive, not loud, not bustling, but beating quietly like a heart beneath a layer of frost. He breathes in again. The scent of distant smoke mingles with the sharp air, filling his senses. He is ready now. There are homes to enter, families to meet, practices to witness, and forgotten wisdom threaded through the coldest hours of the night. Slowly, he steps forward. The journey through the frozen village has only begun. The traveler moves slowly toward the nearest cottage, guided by the faintest shimmer of firelight leaking through the shutters. The cold deepens the closer he gets, as though the night wishes to remind him just how hostile it can be before he steps inside any warmth. Snow crunches under his boots, the sound gentle and crisp, echoing softly against the quiet cottages. When he finally reaches the door, he pauses. A thin wisp of smoke rises from the chimney. That alone tells him the family inside has managed to keep their small fire alive a little longer. He lifts the wooden latch and slips into the cottage. At once, the contrast surrounds him. The warmth inside is not strong, not even particularly comforting, but it is enough to make the cold feel like it loosens its grip. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and boiled vegetables. A pot hangs above the fire pit, and steam curls lazily from its contents. The traveler can tell from its color and aroma that it is some kind of pottage, the dependable meal of winter's simple, hearty, stretched to last. A woman sits beside the hearth, stirring it with slow, careful strokes. She glances at him with tired curiosity, though she does not seem startled. Visitors were not common on winter nights, but anyone who came seeking warmth was rarely turned away. Her hands move in a rhythm shaped by years of repetition. She knows exactly how long the pot can stay before it risks burning, how many scraps of vegetables must go in to stretch the stew to feed her family, and which pieces of the firewood must be saved for the coldest hours before dawn. The rest of the family settles nearby. A man, his shoulders rounded from a day's labor, rubs warmth into his hands while quietly watching the embers. Two children sit on a small bench made from uneven planks, their wool layers wrapped tightly around them. They speak with soft voices, aware that loud sounds seem to lose warmth somehow, as if energy itself must be rationed. The traveler stands near the wall, observing each detail in silence. The fire is small, not the bold, roaring fire that stories sometimes describe, but a controlled and cautious flame. Wood is precious. The family has only a small pile left, stacked neatly beside the hearth. Each piece has been selected carefully. Some aretin, meant for catching the first spark. Others are thicker, meant for the deeper night. The mother knows the difference, without thinking. Her eyes move to the pile now and then, as though counting how many hours of heat remain. The man crouches beside the fire and begins the delicate process of banking it. He drags ashes forward, spreading them just enough to soften the flames without snuffing them out. The traveler watches, the slow movements. Banking a fire is a skill learned early in life here. Done well, faint coals survive until morning. Done poorly, the family wakes to a dead hearth and must spend precious time and energy striking flint to coax out a new flame. On nights this cold, even a few minutes without heat can feel heavy. The traveler notices the walls as his eyes adjust to the dim light. They are built from wattle and daub wooden beams interwoven with sticks, then packed with mud, straw, and clay. The surface is uneven, and in some places the daub is cracked from years of frost and heat. Gaps have been filled with moss, scraps of cloth, or whatever material the family had at hand that year. The walls provide shelter, but the cold never truly stays out. A small draft slides across the floor, and the children instinctively lift their feet. They know this movement well. Cold gathers at the ground first, seeping into the bones of anyone sitting too low. The family sleeps, raised when possible, even if only a few inches, to escape the cold creeping along the floorboards. The traveler steps closer to the hearth. The warmth is uneven. The left side radiates heat, while the right has cooled slightly. These are tiny details that only matter in winter, and yet they matter greatly. The woman shifts the pot to catch what little heat remains on the cooler side. The scent of root vegetables fills the air: turnips, carrots, onions, perhaps a few dried herbs saved from autumn. She ladles a small portion into a wooden bowl. The steam rises gently, carrying a comforting earthiness. The traveler does not ask to share. He simply watches. The children lean forward eagerly as bowls are passed to them. Each child holds their bowl close, letting the rising warmth touch their cheeks before taking slow bites. Food warms the inside. Fire warms the outside, and together they make the night bearable. In the corner, a small basket sits near the hearth. At first, the traveler takes it for a bundle of sticks, but upon closer glance, he sees little charms tucked among them, bits of carved wood, dried herbs tied with twine, and even something that looks like a tiny frog skin, stiffened by age. These charms likely represent winter luck or protection. Such things are not magic in any true sense, but they offer reassurance. In a world where cold and illness walk hand in hand, small comforts matter. The traveler shifts closer to a wooden stool and sits. The stool tilts slightly, worn uneven by decades of use, but holds firm enough. He listens as the children finish their food. Their voices drop into sleepy murmurs. One leans gently against the other, their wool layers brushing with quiet friction. The man stands and takes a final piece of wood, thinner than the others, and places it atop the embers. The flame accepts it slowly, not with bright sparks, but with a steady glow, enough to keep the room warm, but not enough to waste fuel. He dusts his hands and nods in quiet satisfaction. Now that the meal is done and the fire is set, the family begins preparing the sleeping space. They unroll blankets made from rough wool, some patched so often that the fabric looks like a mosaic. The mother shakes out a thick cloak and lays it over the corner where the children will sleep. Wool is heavy, but that weight means warmth. The children nestle beneath it at once, their breaths already smoothing into the first signs of drowsiness. The man sits again, rubbing his palms together slowly. The woman joins him. They exchange a silent understanding. Another evening survived, another night that asks them for caution and patience. Neither complains. This is how generations have lived before them, and how generations will live after. The traveler watches their eyes reflect the dim firelight. There is no fear in them, only vigilance and fatigue. Winter teaches both. Outside, a sudden gust pushes against the shutters. The sound is harsh and hollow. The children stir for a moment, but do not wake. The father stands to press a cloth more firmly along the window's edge, just enough to soften the wind's reach. The traveler sees how many small actions make up survival here. Nothing heroic, nothing dramatic. Careful, thoughtful gestures that keep each family alive until morning. He leans back slightly, letting the quiet fill the room. The fire glows. The blankets rustle. The woman hums something under her breath, a small tune that barely rises, yet eases the air around them. In this tiny cottage, warmed by a fire barely larger than a lantern, the traveler begins to understand the deeper rhythm of winter life. Not just the cold, but the resilience. Not just the struggle, but the steady commitment to each night's quiet demands. He knows he cannot stay long. The village has other homes, other stories held within their walls. But before he leaves, he allows himself one more lingering look at the family gathered around the fading glow of their hearth. Their world is small, but their warmth, however fragile, holds back the winter for one more night. And with that thought, he rises, steps silently to the door, and slips back into the frozen dark. The traveler steps back into the open night, and the cold returns to him immediately, as if it had been waiting just outside the cottage door. It folds around his coat, presses into the seams of his gloves, and settles against his cheeks with steady insistence. He takes a slow breath, watching it billow in front of him like pale mist. The village is quieter now than before. The small noises of evening activity have faded, leaving only those sounds that winter shapes in its own way. He begins walking along the narrow lane again. The snow beneath his boots has changed texture. Where the surface was once powder soft near the cottage, it is now crisp and brittle, almost glassy. Each step produces a clear, controlled crunch, a reminder that the cold has deepened. The traveler pays attention to this, because snow in winter reveals the hour even when the sky does not. Deep night compresses the snow, tightens it, and sharpens every sound. As he moves between two cottages, he hears the timbers groan above him. Houses built from oak and elm always respond to winter. When frost settles into the beams, the wood stiffens and expands. The traveler lifts his face to listen. Another slow creak follows, answering the first, as though the roof is adjusting its weight under the cold sky. Villagers are long accustomed to these sounds, but to an outsider they might seem like voices old, tired, but watching. He pauses near a shuttered window. The faintest whistle of wind slips through a crack beneath the frame. It is thin, almost hesitant, but unmistakably cold. Curtains inside the home shift ever so slightly. A dog inside gives a low, muffled bark, perhaps reacting to the same sound. The traveler listens as the wind moves around the house, brushing past one corner, circling around the back, and then dissolving into the night. Winter wind in a village behaves like a searching animal. It tests doors, explores gaps, pushes against walls, and gathers in the narrow passageways where it can make the most noise. He continues on. Somewhere ahead, a rooster gives a confused, half-asleep cluck, unsettled by the cold more than any sense of morning. A hen rustles beside him from inside a small coop, soft feathers shifting as the bird tucks its head deeper beneath its wing. The traveler hears the faint crackle of frost sliding down the slanted roof of the coop. It taps the ground with tiny, fragile clicks. He moves toward the well again, where the open space allows sound to travel differently. Here, the night feels larger. The air carries noises from farther away. A river runs not far from the village's edge, and beneath this stillness, he can hear the frozen tension of its ice, stretching, settling, and occasionally releasing a deep, hollow echo that rolls across the land like a distant drumbeat. The traveler stands still for a moment to listen. These echoes often startled newcomers, but villagers knew them well. Frozen rivers speak often on nights like this. He steps away from the well and continues deeper into the heart of the settlement. As he walks, he listens to the quieter sounds. The faint brushing of his wool sleeve against his coat, the crack of a tiny icicle breaking from an overhead beam, the subtle shifting of snow loosened from a thatched roof. Voices from inside the cottages travel softly into the lane. A murmurere quiet cough there, the low hum of a lullaby from a tired parent. None of these sounds disturb the night. Instead, they settle into it, becoming part of the rhythm of winter living. The traveler notices that the cold changes human sound as well. When people speak indoors, their voices are muffled by wool, blankets, and low fires. When someone steps outside, even briefly, shoes thud more heavily on wooden thresholds, and breaths leave the body in sharp, quick bursts. Every sound becomes more noticeable because winter strips away anything that might mask it. Near the far end of the lane, the traveler reaches a cottage with walls slightly bowed from age. He stops in front of it. Inside, a baby has begun to cry, not loudly, but with a thin, unsettled whimper. The cry rises and falls quickly. A soft voice responds lightly, the mother offering comfort with a quiet shush. The whimper fades, The traveler listens as the child's breathing steadies. Babies do not always react to cold the same way adults do, but they feel it sharply, and their cries often reflect the discomfort before anything else. He moves on, letting the night reclaim its silence. Further ahead, a barn connected to a cottage releases a warm breath of hay-scented air. Even from outside, animals shifting inside create a distinct set of sounds. A cow lets out a long, low sigh. A goat scrapes its hoof against wooden boards. The rustling of straw is steady, creating a whisper-like texture that travels toward the traveler. In gentle pulses, the barn door creaks as the wind nudges it, then settles again with a dull thud. The traveler lifts his hand and presses it lightly against the wall of the barn. He can feel the vibration of movement inside, animals breathing, adjusting positions, and settling deeper into their bedding. Barns hold a different kind of warmth and a different kind of quiet, both shaped by living bodies rather than fire. These sounds are familiar companions to villagers who sleep nearby. He leaves the barn and returns to the narrow lane. The sky above remains unchanged dark, crystal clear, and pierced with stars. The traveler recognizes that on nights like this, even the sky seems to make sound feel thinner. There is nothing to absorb it, nothing to soften it. Winter landscapes often feel as though they are made of stone and glass. Every footstep, every whisper, every creak travels farther, cut cleaner, and held in the air longer. He walks along the frozen ground, passing cottages one by one, listening to how life continues inside them. A chill turns over in their bedding, and the straw beneath them rustles faintly. A log cracks in a hearth, sending a pop into the air. Someone adjusts a blanket, the wool sliding softly across another layer. These small sounds hold meaning because they reflect the way people live through winter, not grand or dramatic moments, but the daily persistence of living, breathing, resting, and enduring. The traveler stops near a wooden fence, leaning slightly against it as he listens one more time. A deep, cold gust sweeps through the lane, and for a moment all sounds disappear. Then slowly, they return. The faint shimmer of frost shifting, the dull groan of a roof beam, the quiet breathing of a sleeping village. It is in these moments that winter reveals itself fully, not just through temperature, but through the way it changes the world's voice. The traveler stands quietly, letting the night's sounds settle into his memory. Then, once he feels he has heard all that this part of the village has to teach him, he pushes gently away from the fence, steps further down the lane, and prepares to continue his journey toward the next hidden warmth waiting for him in the dark. The traveler continues down the narrow lane, guided now by a different kind of glow-on, warmer and steadier than the small hearth he left behind. It leaks through the shutters of a larger cottage, and even from a distance, he can sense that more than one family rests inside. The cold presses hard at his back as he walks, the night deepening around him, but the light ahead seems to hold a promise of shared warmth. When he reaches the door, he hears low voices, soft and unhurried. Not the sharp conversations of daytime, but the drifting tones of people settling in for sleep. He lifts the latch gently and steps inside. At once, the scent of warm wool fills the air. The room is dim but warmer than any place he has entered tonight. The heat is not from the hearth alone. In fact, the fire in the corner is little more than a red glow, its flame nearly buried beneath freshly banked ash. The true warmth comes from the bodies gathered together in the center of the room. Several families, perhaps 8 or 9 people in total, have arranged their bedding into a wide sleeping cluster. Blankets, cloaks, and patched quilts overlap in a pile that looks almost like a woven nest. Straw mattresses lie side by side beneath it all, packed closely together to eliminate the cold gaps that settle between separate beds. The traveler pauses near the door, letting his eyes adjust. One of the older men notices him and gives a small, welcoming nod. There is no surprise or hesitation. Cold nights make everyone generous with warmth, even with strangers. The traveler steps further in. The walls are lined with bundles of wool, spare clothing, and a few wooden chests. But the room's attention is centered on the sleeping cluster. The firelight reflects off faces softened by fatigue. The air feels thicker here, layered with the breath of many people resting close together. It is the kind of warmth that cannot be built through fire alone. A woman sitting near the edge of the group motions toward the traveler, inviting him to come closer. Her voice is quiet so as not to disturb the half-asleep children nestled in the middle. He approaches and kneels beside the cluster. The heat radiating from it is surprisingly strong, rising in slow waves. The youngest of the children lie closest to the center, tucked firmly beneath the heaviest blankets. Their cheeks are rosy, their breaths soft and steady. A large dog is curled next to them, its fur brushed smooth by gentle hands. The dog shifts slightly and releases a slow exhale, adding yet another layer of warmth to the group. Around the children lie the adults. Each person faces inward, conserving heat as efficiently as possible. Their wool layers blend into the shared bedding, creating one continuous shelter. Bodies positioned closely lose less warmth, and this arrangement has become second nature to them over countless winters. The traveler sits on a low stool near the edge, observing how naturally the group adjusts to one another. When one person shifts, the straw beneath them crackles softly, and others make small movements to settle back into comfortable positions. The entire group seems to breathe as a single, slow rhythm. The woman near him explains in a hushed voice that on the coldest nights, families in the village often sleep together in one room, sometimes even in one shared bed. It is not an act of intimacy alone, but of survival. They call it borrowing heat, not in jest, but an acknowledgement that warmth passes from person to person, an unspoken agreement that keeps everyone safe. She points to layers of cloth hanging from a beam above the bedding. These are makeshift curtains, hung to trap warm air near the sleepers. They drape loosely but create a small pocket of higher temperature compared to the rest of the room. Even the faintest breeze from the drafty walls stays mostly outside the circle. The traveler studies the faces. He sees a grandmother lying closest to the fire, her breathing shallow but steady. A young couple rests on one side, arms wrapped around each other beneath a thick, hand-woven blanket. A boy about 12 years old lies near the dog, his hand resting lightly on the animal's back. Across from him, a girl tucks her feet beneath the shared coverings, shifting deeper into warmth. No one seems disturbed by the closeness. Space is not a boundary here. Privacy is something that belongs to the warmer seasons. Winter belongs to the community. The dog lifts its head and looks toward the traveler with relaxed eyes before settling again. A few chicken feathers cling to its fur, reminders of the day's tasks. The traveler notices how the animal's body acts as an anchor of warmth, its presence deliberate and welcomed. A man sitting near the corner speaks quietly enough that his voice barely reaches the traveler. He explains that some winters grow so harsh that the cold creeps into even the thickest walls, and on those nights, families refuse to sleep alone. He mentions a year remembered only as the bitter winter, when almost the entire village gathered in the two largest cottages until the worst passed. They slept in layers children at the center, elders nearest the fire, animals tucked at the edges, and adults forming the outer ring. The traveler imagines the scene, dozens of breaths rising into the same air, cloth, overlapping cloth, hands resting on shoulders to reassure one another. The village becoming one body against the cold. The man chuckles softly and recalls how difficult it was to move in the morning, when everyone had to untangle themselves from a mass of limbs and blankets. Yet no one complained. Warmth mattered more than comfort, and comfort mattered more than the luxury of space. The traveler lowers himself to feel the straw mattress. Beneath the bedding, it is uneven and rustles with even the faintest pressure, but the heat that rises from it is unmistakable. Straw traps air, and air traps warmth. The layers of fabric above it do the rest. A young girl near the center stirs and opens her eyes briefly. She glances at the traveler with a sleepy curiosity before letting her eyes drift closed again. Her breathing returns to the steady rhythm of someone wrapped in warmth and exhaustion. The traveler listens to the group's quiet sounds, the soft rustle of wool, the dog's slow breathing, the crackle of a shifting straw mattress, the distant whistle of wind outside. These noises create a kind of nighttime chorus, gentle and steady. Nothing about it is decorative or romantic. It is practical, instinctive, and necessary. Winter demands closeness, the people answer, without question. The woman beside him adjusts the edge of a blanket and explains that children often fall asleep first, their bodies warming the space quickly. Adults follow more slowly, waiting until the embers settle and the room dims. On summer nights, they talk softly before sleep-sharing worries, telling stories, or simply sitting in quiet companionship. Tonight, The room is too tired for any long conversation. The day has been cold. The evening colder still. Everyone has given what little strength they had to chores, meals, and preparations. The traveler rises after a time, careful not to disturb the sleepers. The woman gives him a small nod, the kind exchanged by people who understand the heaviness of winter nights. He steps back toward the door. As he opens it, a gust of cold air sweeps in. The closest sleepers shift instinctively toward one another, tightening their cluster without waking. The traveler slips outside, closing the door gently behind him. The cold reclaims him instantly. Sharper now that he has left the warm center of the shared bedding, his breath curls upward in slow clouds. The village is quiet once more. The night still has many truths left to reveal, and the traveler continues forward, ready for the next place where warmth and winter meet. The traveler walks deeper into the village, guided now by the faint rustle of straw being handled inside a nearby cottage. The sound is subtle but distinct, soft, crackling, shifting fibers, the quiet rhythm of someone preparing a bed for the night. He follows it until he reaches a small house with a sagging roof and a narrow wooden door. The shutters are closed, but a soft glow leaks from the gaps, hinting at warmth inside. He lifts the latch and steps into the room. The air inside is warmer than he expected, though still far from comfortable. The heat comes not from the hearthware. Only a few deep red embers remain but from the steady work happening at the center of the floor. A family of 4 is arranging a fresh straw mattress. Their movements are practiced and patient, shaped by years of winter nights just like this one. The traveler stands quietly near the door, allowing his eyes to adjust. The father spreads handfuls of straw across a wooden frame, smoothing it out with deliberate motions. Each push creates a soft crackle. The mother kneels beside him, shaking loose clusters to keep the bedding light and airy. 2 children help in small ways, one passing armfuls of straw, the other flattening the edges to keep everything lined up. The traveler steps closer. The father gives him a tired but friendly nod, welcoming him without needing words. The traveler notices immediately how clean the straw looks. These families replace their bedding often in winter because fresh straw holds warmth far better than flattened, old bundles. He watches the mother lift a handful and shake it lightly. Dust rises in a faint cloud, glowing like tiny sparks in the dim firelight. The room smells of dry grass, earth, and the lingering sense of summer hidden inside the straw. Once the first layer is smoothed, the family adds more. The father explains quietly that too little straw means cold seeps in from beneath, but too much straw becomes uneven and restless under the body. The right amount is learned through experience. He pats the mattress, testing its firmness. The traveler kneels to touch the straw. It yields under his fingers, then springs back slightly. The material seems simple, but its usefulness is clear. Straw traps pockets of air between its fibers, and those pockets hold warmth in a way that wool alone cannot. The mother spreads a linen sheet over the top. The fabric is coarse, slightly scratchy, but it keeps the straw from poking too sharply through the layers. Linen is not common in every home, but this family has patched theirs so many times that the sheet is now a combination of old cloth stitched together. Despite its rough texture, it adds a thin layer of comfort and cleanliness. The children pull 2 wool blankets from a chest at the corner of the room. Each blanket is heavy and worn, with visible patches of darker wool where holes have been repaired. Wool is valued for its warmth, even when it carries the faint scent of lanolin and smoke. They spread the first blanket over the linen sheet and press down the edges to hold everything in place. The traveler notices how intentional every action is. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. Every layer has a purpose. The father gestures toward the straw mattress and invites the traveler to test it. He lowers himself slowly, feeling the uneven surface beneath him. The mattress crackles softly, adjusting to his weight. It is not smooth or luxurious, but it is surprisingly warm. The straw beneath him holds heat left over from the family's hands, and the wool above him traps it close to his body. The father smiles at the traveler's reaction. He explains that, in winter, straw holds warmth better when bodies settle into it. After a few hours, the mattress will feel warmer than the air around it. It is not comfort in the modern sense, but it is a refuge from the cold. The mother adds that they sometimes mix dried herbs, lavender in summer, meadowsweet in early autumn into. These herbs keep pests away and offer a pleasant scent during long nights. She reaches into a small clothed bag beside her and sprinkles a few remaining dried leaves into the mattress, rubbing them gently into the layers. The faint smell drifts across the room, earthy and calming. The traveler listens as she describes how straw beds slowly flatten through the season, how families gather more from barns or harvest fields when possible, and how they shake the mattresses out during the day to keep the straw lively. Old straw is saved for animal bedding, fire, kindling, or packing gaps in walls. The children climb onto the edge of the bed and lie down for a moment, laughing quietly at the crackling sound beneath them. Their laughter is brief, softened by tiredness, but genuine. They know this bed well. It has been built and rebuilt many times. Its warmth is familiar. Outside, a gust of wind presses against the cottage walls. The shutters rattle once, then fall still. The father glances at the window, then adds another blanket to the foot of the bed for extra warmth. He explains that winter wind always arrives at the same hour, and that the coldest stretch of night is still ahead. The traveler rises, brushing stray pieces of straw from his coat. He watches as the family prepares to settle in for the night. They add a second wool blanket, heavier than the first, and tuck it tightly along the sides. The room grows quieter as they finish arranging their space. The mother steps to the hearth and checks the embers. She stirs them gently, ensuring a few coals remain glowing. There is no firewood left to spare tonight. The family must rely on the mattress and blankets for warmth until morning. The father sits on the edge of the straw bed, his posture relaxing as he removes his boots. The children nestle into the center, their bodies curling naturally into familiar sleeping positions. The mother spreads one last cloak over them, making sure their feet are covered. The traveler stands in the dim light, absorbing the scene. The simplicity of the bedding, the careful layering, the way the family moves with practiced coordination, everything reflects a lifetime of enduring winter's demands. The father lies back and exhales slowly. The mother joins the children in the center, pulling the blankets closer. The dog at the foot of the bed shifts its position and settles against their legs, adding a warm presence to the cluster. The traveler notices the sound of the straw as the family adjusts. It crackles softly, no louder than a whispered word. Soon, even that sound fades as their movements slow and their breathing steadies. The room becomes calm. The traveler steps quietly toward the door. He gives the family a final, grateful nod. They do not stir. They have slipped into the kind of steady rest that cold nights demand, where sleep is both relief and preparation. He opens the door, just enough to slip through. The cold greets him again with a sharpness that makes his breath catch. He pulls his cloak tighter and looks back once at the cottage, its faint glow holding firm against the dark. The straw bed inside will warm them through the night, and the traveler continues down the snowy path, ready for the next glimpse into winter's quiet resilience. The traveler presses forward through the deepening cold, guided now by the faint scent of lanolin drifting from another cottage. It is a smell he recognizes, well earthy, oily, unmistakable. Wool is being worked inside. In a winter village, that scent is as important as fire itself. It means warmth, survival, and long nights spent preparing fabric thick enough to stand between a family and the cold. He reaches the cottage and pushes the door open. Warm air greets him, though not because of a large fire. The hearth here holds only a small flame, but the room is wrapped in wool from floor to ceiling. It is as if the entire house is padded against the winter. Bundles of carded wool hang on wooden pegs. Folded blankets rest in neat piles. Thick garments drape over benches and stools. Even the walls are partly covered with woolen cloth, transforming the room into a soft barrier against drafts. A woman sits near the hearth, carding raw wool with slow, practiced motions. Each pull of the carding combs sends soft fibers drifting into the air like pale dust. She glances up and gives the traveler a gentle nod, her hands never pausing in their rhythmic work. The wool beneath her fingers looks coarse, dotted with small bits of straw, but as she draws the combs through it, the fibers loosen and soften. A man sits across from her, folding a heavy blanket with care. Its edges are frayed, showing years of use, but the center remains thick and capable of holding warmth. He smooths the fabric with the flat of his hand, then places it beside a growing stack of bedding prepared for the night. The traveler steps further inside. The air feels different, here warmer, heavier and muted. Wool absorbs sound as well as cold. Even quiet movements seem soft. He moves toward a wooden stool offered by the man and sits, watching the family finish their nightly preparations. A young boy pulls a woolen cap over his head and grins proudly. The cap covers his ears and fits snugly, and he pats the top of it to show the traveler how well it sits. The traveler smiles back. Woolen caps are essential on nights like this. Most heat escapes through the head, and villagers learned long ago that sleeping without one can make the cold settle deeper into the body. The boy's father chuckles and explains that winter nights are quieter when everyone keeps their caps on, not because of noise, but because children wake less often from the chill. He lifts another cap from a hook and shakes it out before placing it beside the bedding. Some caps are thin, meant for daily wear. Others are thick, made only for sleeping. The traveler runs his fingers gently over one of the blankets. It is rough, but strong, and radiates a faint warmth even without being near the fire. Wool behaves differently from other materials. It traps air within its fibers and holds heat even when slightly damp. The traveler can tell this blanket has been used for many winters. Its patches a record of cold seasons endured. The woman sets her carding tools aside and lifts a large wool tunic. She holds it out for the traveler to feel. He presses his hand against it. The tunic is heavy, almost like a layer of armor. If worn to abate, its weight would settle around a person, trapping their warmth beneath it. She explains that many nights they sleep fully dressed, caps, tunics, stockings, and several layers of woolen cloth to keep the cold away. She gestures toward the walls. Large sheets of woolen fabric hang from wooden pegs, creating a soft barrier against drafts. The traveler steps closer to one and touches it. The fabric is thick, almost stiff from years of use, but it hangs in such a way that it blocks the flow of cold air. When the wind presses against the outer wall, the wool sways faintly, absorbing the movement and keeping the air inside steadier. The father rises and walks to the bed. It is not a raised frame like the wealthy homes use. Instead, it is a straw mattress covered with several layers of wool. The top blanket is freshly brushed and warm from being near the fire earlier in the evening. He lifts one corner, checking the thickness. Satisfied, he folds it back down and tucks the edges inward. The traveler watches the children crawl onto the bed, arranging themselves comfortably. They tug the blankets around their shoulders and settle against each other. One of them lifts the wool near his face and inhales the familiar scent. Even though the smell of lanolin is strong, it brings a sense of safety. Wool holds memory of sheep tended in past seasons, of hands who washed, spun, and wove it, and of nights when its warmth made the difference between comfort and shivering. The mother pulls a smaller blanket from a chest. This one is woven more finely, its fibers smoother than the others. She explains that it comes from the fleece of a younger sheep, softer, lighter, and warmer. It is reserved for the coldest nights and for the youngest children. She lays it gently across their sleeping forms, smoothing it carefully. The traveler notices the fire again. The flame is low, but the room does not feel cold. The wool hanging from the walls traps the warmth, spreading it slowly. He begins to understand why this home feels different. The fire is not the heart of warmth. Here, Willis, a soft creaking sound comes from the ceiling. The house reacts to the cold again, but the sound is softer here than in other cottages. The wool-draped walls absorb the noise, giving the room a stillness that feels almost protective. The father walks to a small stool and picks up a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside it are herbs dried, chamomile, mint, and a few flower petals saved from summer. He shakes the bundle lightly over the bedding. The herbs fall in tiny pinches, adding a faint scent that mixes with the wool. He explains that it keeps the blankets fresh and helps with breathing during the night. The mother lights a small tallow candle and places it in a clay holder beside the bed. Its flame flickers softly, reflecting off the woolen surfaces and casting a warm glow across the room. The light settles over the family like another layer of security. The traveler notices that even the door has a wool layer hung across its interior. A thick blanket drapes over it, blocking a draft he had on tea realized was present until he saw how the blanket shifted slightly with the wind. Such small details reveal how carefully the family guards against the cold. The father sits on the edge of the bed, rubbing warmth into his hands once more. The mother climbs beneath the blankets beside the children. As soon as she settles, the entire cluster relaxes, adjusting into the shared warmth. The traveler stands slowly, taking in the scene. The wool blankets rise and fall with each breath the family takes. The quiet in the room deepens as the children drift closer to sleep, their faces softened by fatigue and warmth. He offers the family a grateful nod and moves toward the door. As he lifts the wool curtain covering it, a wave of cold air sweeps in from outside. For a moment, the warmth behind him presses softly against his back, as if reminding him of the world he is leaving. He steps out into the night. The cold is sharper now, almost metallic against his skin. He pulls his cloak close and breathes out slowly. Behind him, the wool-filled cottage glows faintly through the shutters, holding its warmth as the family settles into sleep. And the traveler continues through the silent village, ready for the next shelter that waits in the dark. The traveler continues down the frozen lane, and soon the modest cottages give way to a structure taller and straighter than the rest. Its beams are well cut, its roof less burdened by snow, and the faint golden glow behind its shutters is steadier than anything he has seen so far. This is the home of someone with means, someone whose nights are shaped not only by survival, but by comfort uncommon in a winter village. He steps toward the door and knocks lightly. After a moment, the door opens just wide enough for warm air to escape in a soft wave. A man, wrapped in a padded robe lined with fur, stands inside. He sees the traveler and, with a small gesture, invites him to enter. The difference is immediate. The room holds a warmth that is not merely the absence of cold, but a presence thicker, more stable, almost confident. The hearth still burns with a full flame rather than embers. Two thick logs lie across one another, glowing with the steady heat that only well-seasoned wood can provide. The traveler realizes this family does not count each piece of firewood with caution. They have enough fuel to burn longer, brighter, and with less fear. But the hearth is not what draws the traveler's attention. His eyes are pulled instead toward the center of the room, where a bed rises above the cold floor on a sturdy wooden frame. It looks almost like a mound of soft shapes layered one atop another. The surface is round, slightly raised, with a gentleness that straw cannot provide. This is a feather bed rare, valuable, and cared for, like a treasured possession. The woman of the house approaches, carrying a linen sheet freshly inspected. She lays it across the feather bed with slow, practiced care. The sheet settles into the soft filling beneath, creating gentle folds in the surface. The traveler steps closer. The woman gives him a polite smile and invites him to feel the fabric. He touches it lightly. The linen is smoother than what he has felt in other homes, fine enough that it barely scratches the skin. The man pats the bed with pride, explaining in a calm voice that this feather mattress was made by his father, and before that, by his grandfather. The feathers inside are from carefully tended geese, plucked only during certain seasons, washed, dried, and stored until enough had gathered to fill the mattress. He speaks of it not as an object, but as something inherited, a comfort shaped by years of patient work. A young servant enters with a cloth bundle and begins uncovering several small pillows filled with feathers. He shakes each one to fluff it, the feathers inside rustling quietly. The traveler notices the faint scent of dried herbs rising from them. The servant explains that the herbs are placed inside the linings to keep insects away and to bring a mild, soothing fragrance to sleep. The woman retrieves a quilt, stitched from wool squares, dyed in soft, fading colors. She drapes it across the bed, smoothing it with careful hands. Its edges show years of small stitches, replaced patches. Seams reinforced many times, but the quilt remains thick and warm. She lifts another blanket, finer than the first, its weight light and airy. When she unfolds it, the traveler realizes it too is filled with feathers, giving it a lofty softness that wool alone cannot recreate. She spreads this second quilt across the first, layering warmth in a way that feels deliberate and deeply familiar. A girl, perhaps the daughter of the house, carries a long bolster stuffed with feathers and places it at the head of the bed. It appears almost like a shield, designed to block drafts that slip down from the wall and to support the neck and shoulders of the sleepers. She smooths its surface, pressing her hand into it. The filling shifts beneath her palm, responding in a gentle wave. The traveler, curious, asks permission to sit. The father nods. He lowers himself onto the edge of the feather bed. It yields instantly, adjusting to his weight with a quiet sigh. There is no crackle of straw, no unaben pace suddenly. A smooth, buoyant softness. The warmth rising from it surprises him. Unlike straw, which depends on body heat to grow warm, feathers seem already prepared to hold heat close. The traveler sinks a little more, feeling the bed respond around him. For a moment, he understands why feather beds are mentioned in wills and inventories. They offer a kind of rest that winter rarely allows. The daughter steps away and returns with a fur coverlet. It is dark, thick, and soft, clearly from an animal raised and skinned with great care. She lays it across the foot of the bed. Even from a distance, the traveler can see how dense the fur is. She explains that on the coldest nights, this fur is pulled all the way up to the chin, trapping warmth with surprising ease. The father, seeing the traveler's interest, adds that feather beds require upkeep. They must be fluffed often to keep the feathers from clumping and kept away from damp air. Some families place them near inner walls to protect them from cold drafts, while others insist they belong on the warmer side of the chamber. The traveler notes the difference and stores it quietly. Not all winter wisdom agrees from home to home. He steps away from the bed and looks toward the walls. The tapestry hangs across one side, a scene of a hunt, its colors dimmed by firelight. The woman explains that the tapestry serves more than decoration. It blocks drafts from the stone wall behind it, keeping the warmth near the bed. The traveler touches the fabric lightly. It is thick, heavier than it appears. As the family prepares to settle in, the flame in the hearth softens. The father places another log across the fire, not rushed by fear that he might run out. The room glows in a steady amber that reflects across the feather bed's layers. The daughter smooths one last fold in the blankets and climbs onto the bed. The mother joins her, and the father prepares to lie down as well. The servant steps quietly to a corner, folding spare blankets for the next day. The traveler watches. The family's faces relax as they settle into the softness beneath them. The bed envelops them gently. Wool layers press warmly against their shoulders. The fur coverlet waits at their feet as an added promise of heat if the night grows harsher. He stands for a moment longer, absorbing the scene. This is a different kind of winter. Not free from cold, but softened by wealth, preparation, and materials most villagers will never touch. He gives a respectful nod to the family, stepping back toward the door. The fur-lined robe of the father catches the firelight, and for a moment the room feels like a refuge outside the reach of winter. The traveler lifts the latch and steps into the night. The cold greets him with its usual bite, sharper after the warmth he has just left. He pulls his cloak close and breathes slowly, watching frost gather in the air. The featherbed's comfort fades behind him, but its memory lingers as he walks onward, ready to discover another shape of warmth hidden somewhere in the frozen village. The traveler leaves the larger house behind and follows a narrow lane that bends toward the far edge of the village. The cottages here are older, their beams darkened and slightly twisted from years of cold and heat. Snow gathers thickly around their bases, and the roofs slope low, almost as though trying to shield themselves from the wind. He approaches a cottage smaller than the rest. A thin thread of smoke rises from its chimney, and a faint light glimmers behind the shuttered window. He steps inside quietly. At once, he notices something different. The room is dim, but the warmth is more concentrated than in most homes. The fire in the hearth is modest, little more than a glowing bed of coals, but the space holds heat better than any small cottage he has entered so far. The walls have been lined with planks, sealed tightly, and covered in a thin layer of plaster. But it is something else that catches his attention. In the far corner of the room, built into the wall itself, sits an enclosed sleeping niche. It looks like a wooden cupboard at first, glance a box-shaped alcove with sliding panels. But the moment the traveler steps closer, he sees the bedding tucked inside, the thick blankets neatly arranged, and the faint outline of a person lying within it. The niche is raised slightly above the floor, just high enough to avoid the cold that gathers near the ground. Its walls are made from thick timber, creating a hollow sanctuary where warmth collects and lingers. The opening is small, just large enough for a person to crawl inside, and is partly covered by a wool curtain that hangs in gentle folds. The traveler approaches, and the curtain shifts slightly. A woman inside opens her eyes, surprised for only a moment before recognizing him as a harmless visitor. She gives a slight nod and moves the curtain aside, to let him see more clearly. Her husband sits on a stool nearby, carving a small wooden tool. He explains, with quiet pride, that the sleeping niche was built decades ago by his grandfather. The older man had traveled once to a region where winters were even harsher than here, and he returned with the idea of building a bed that traps heat, not with wool or feathers alone, but with structure. The traveler studies the construction closely. The walls of the niche are thick, made from planks fitted tightly together with wooden pegs. The roof of the niche is low enough that a person can lie inside without much room to sit upright, but it keeps heat concentrated around the body. The interior is lined with woven cloth and filled with layers of blankets. A single lantern hangs just outside the opening, its soft glow warming the air that seeps in. The woman inside shifts slightly, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. The traveler notices how small the space feels, neither cramped nor uncomfortable, but intentionally enclosed. The niche has its own quiet atmosphere, separated from the rest of the room. The husband explains that during winter, this niche becomes the warmest place in the house. Even when the fire burns low, the heat from two sleeping bodies inside the wooden enclosure lingers until morning. The traveler nods, understanding now why the air feels warmer here than in many cottages with larger fires. The man gestures for the traveler to sit on the edge of the platform that supports the niche. He does so carefully. Even from the outside, he can sense the warmth radiating from within. It is different from the warmth of blankets or a far more contained, more steady. The wooden walls trap the heat, preventing it from drifting into the rest of the room. The woman inside smiles faintly and reaches toward the small opening to show him the bedding. The mattress is made from a mixture of straw and wool, providing both structure and insulation. A heavy wool blanket covers the top, and beneath her head lies a pillow stuffed with feathers. She taps the platform gently and explains that the wood beneath is thick enough that cold does not rise through it during the night. The traveler listens as the husband speaks again, telling him about the nightly routine. At evening, they warm the niche before sleeping by placing a heated stone wrapped in cloth at its center. The stone is taken from near the hearth while the fire is still burning. By the time they settle in, the stone has released enough heat to chase away the initial chill. The traveler runs his hand along the edge of the wooden frame. It feels smooth, worn by years of use. The wood holds a faint warmth of its own. He realizes that this niche is not just a bed, it is a design shaped by necessity and ingenuity, created to use as little fuel as possible while offering maximum protection from winter. The man explains further. When snowstorms sweep through the village and firewood becomes scarce, the niche allows them to burn less. Sometimes the fire is banked very early in the evening, and they rely almost entirely on the niche to stay warm through the darkest hours. It has saved them many times. The couple's young daughter sits nearby, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She crawls toward the niche and peeks into the opening, as if checking whether it is warm enough. Her father lifts her gently and places her inside beside her mother. The child curls naturally into the small space, her presence instantly adding to the shared warmth. The traveler watches as the mother pulls the wool curtain halfway closed, leaving a small gap for light. The curtain is thick, woven from coarse wool, and it blocks the cold drafts completely. The lantern outside flickers softly, and its glow slips into the niche, casting a warm amber hue on the wooden walls within. The traveler asks if he may look inside. The husband nods again. He leans toward the opening. The warmth that escapes is gentle but concentrated, like air that has been stored, preserved, and kept close. The interior smells faintly of wood, wool, and the dried herbs placed near the head of the bed. Tiny bundles of lavender and mint hang from small pegs inside, continuing the village tradition of combining comfort with practical pest control. The niche is narrow, but not unpleasant. 2 people can lie inside comfortably. The child, now settled between her parents, breathes quietly, her small breaths blending with theirs. Outside the niche, the room feels cooler by comparison, though the fire still glows. The traveler steps back and sits again on the stool offered to him. The husband moves to bank the fire for the night, pushing ash forward and settling embers beneath a small log so they burn slowly. The traveler watches the way the light dims, but the room never feels cold. The wooden structure of the niche holds the warmth firmly. Even as the fire fades, the enclosed bed continues to glow softly like a separate world within the home. The mother draws the curtain fully closed now, and her voice, softened further by the wood around her, says goodnight to him. The traveler nods respectfully. The husband sets aside his carving tool and prepares for sleep. He extinguishes the lantern and, with a practiced motion, slides into the niche after his family. The curtain falls closed, sealing the warmth within. The traveler stands and moves to the door. As he steps outside, the cold wraps around him again with its familiar bite. He pulls his cloak tighter and takes a slow breath. Behind him, the cottage grows quiet. The sleeping niche holds its warmth like a small hearth of its own, untouched by the wind. The traveler walks on, ready for the next place where winter has shaped a different kind of refuge. The traveler walks on through the quiet lanes of the village, his breath drifting in pale clouds before dissolving into the frozen air. The night has reached its deepest cold now. Even the sound of his boots is sharper, the snow beneath them hardened into a surface that crackles like thin ice. The cottages ahead stand still and dark, save for one where a gentle flicker pushes through a crack in the shutter. Drawn by the steady rhythm of that light, he approaches and lifts the latch. Inside, he finds a room shaped by quiet resourcefulness. The fire in the hearth has been reduced to embers, yet the place holds more warmth than he expected. His eyes move to the far side of the room, where a large bed stands slightly raised above the floor. But it isn't the bed itself that catches his attention, it's what surrounds it. Heavy curtains, thick and dark, hang from a wooden frame that encircles the bed entirely. They drape all the way to the straw-strewn floor, creating a small enclosed chamber. The traveler steps closer, noticing the way the curtain moves like a soft barrier that shields the sleepers inside from the chill of the room. A woman sits near the bed, stitching a small tear along the edge of one curtain panel. She looks up as he enters, offering a gentle nod. She doesn't seem surprised. Visitors are rare at this hour, but winter nights make people more open to company, especially when they know someone is traveling through the cold alone. She finishes her stitch and runs her hand along the repaired seam. The curtain is made from layers of wool, thick enough that even a lantern's light barely seeps through. She lifts one corner and gestures for the traveler to look inside. He carefully pulls the curtain aside and peers into the enclosed space. Warm air drifts out immediately, almost startling in its softness compared to the chill of the outer room. Inside the curtained bed, the light from a small tallow candle casts a muted glow across the blankets. A man and child sleep there, bundled beneath several wool layers. The air seems still, almost insulated from the larger room. The traveler steps back. The woman explains that on winter nights, these curtains become essential. She pulls the fabric closed again, and the warmth within settles back into place, trapped by the cloth like breath inside a small room. He asks how long they have used such curtains. She smiles faintly and tells him it was her grandmother's idea. They could not afford a bed niche like the family he visited earlier, nor a feather bed like the wealthier households. Instead, they built comfort from what they could stitch, weave, and hang. Over time, she adds, the curtains have become as important as the blankets themselves. The traveler observes the bed frame. It is simple, made from pine beams darkened by years of smoke and use. Wooden pegs hold the curtain rods in place. The fabric hangs from loops, tied with twine, each one reinforced so the weight of the wool does not tear through. The woman steps toward the hearth and stirs the embers with a long iron rod. She adds a small piece of wood, careful not to disturb the sleeping family inside the curtained space. As the flame brightens slightly, the heat spreads across the room. She returns to the bed and lifts the curtain again, showing the traveler how even a faint warmth from the hearth remains trapped inside. The traveler watches the fabric sway gently, noting how the curtain touches the floor. That detail matters. If the curtains ended even a few inches too high, cold air would slide beneath them. She explains that they learned this through trial and error over many winters. She offers him a place to sit on a small stool near the bed. He accepts, touching the curtain lightly. The wool is thick and dense, but it carries the faint scent of smoke and herbs. She tells him they sometimes hang small pouches of dried lavender and rosemary inside the curtain folds, partly for scent, partly to discourage insects. In winter, the herbs grow brittle, but their smell remains. Her voice stays quiet as she continues explaining the nightly routine. Before the family sleeps, the man warms a brick near the fire and wraps it in cloth. He places it inside the curtained bed, letting it heat the space before they crawl in. The traveler recognizes the same practice used for the sleeping niche she saw earlier, though here, the warmth is not held by wood walls, but by layers of wool that trap heat, much like a tent. Children sleep in the center, protected by their parents on either side. The curtains block the draft that moves along the floor, and the air inside stays still enough that even the slightest warmth becomes valuable. She mentions that some nights they must open the curtains slightly because the enclosed space grows too warm. The traveler raises an eyebrow. Surprised, she nods, smiling. In winter, warmth from 2 or 3 bodies inside a sealed space can build quickly. She pulls a stool beside him and explains how the curtains were originally made. Each panel was woven from wool, taken during different seasons. Some parts feel rougher, others smoother, and the colors shift slightly, a patchwork of browns and grays. When the family had more wool in some years, they thickened the curtains. When wool was scarce, they patched holes with whatever they had: old cloaks, worn blankets, and even scraps from tattered garments. The traveler runs his fingers along a patch stitched onto one panel. The stitching is uneven but sturdy. She tells him that these curtains are older than a daughter and will last many winters still, as long as they continue to mend them every season. A faint rustling comes from inside the curtained bed. The child shifts, turning in their sleep. The curtain moves slightly, but not enough to let cold air in. The mother sets her hand against it, making sure it remains tucked along the floor. Outside, a sudden gust presses against the cottage walls. The shutters rattle. A low moan rises from the wind as it squeezes through narrow gaps. The traveler feels a chill spread briefly across the room. But the curtained bed remains still, untouched by the draft. The woman watches the fire for a moment, then returns to check the curtain edges. She lifts a fold, examines the seam, and gently smooths the fabric. Her gestures are small, but they reveal a lifetime of habits shaped by the demands of winter. Eventually, she sits beside the traveler again. She explains that the curtains also create a sense of privacy in a home where space is shared. Even though the curtain does not block sound, it allows the family inside to feel sheltered, giving them a sense of rest that is not interrupted by the movement of the larger room. The traveler nods. In small cottages, privacy is a luxury, but here it is created through fabric rather than walls. As the fire dims again, the woman rises and prepares for her own rest. She lifts the curtain slightly to check on her husband and child, then lowers it again with a gentle motion. She sits on the edge of the bed, takes off her wool shawl, and folds it neatly beside her. She crawls beneath the blankets and lies beside her family. The warmth inside the curtained enclosure deepens as they settle together. Their breaths mix into the same soft rhythm. The traveler rises quietly, offering a small nod of gratitude. She returns it with a faint smile, already half asleep. He steps back toward the door, careful not to disturb the air around the curtains. As he opens the door, a cold gust rushes inside. The curtain shifts slightly but holds firm, its heavy wool blocking the chill instantly. He steps outside, closing the door behind him. The night meets him with a familiar bite, sharper than before, but he takes a slow breath and continues walking. The village remains silent around him, each home shaped by its own way of keeping warmth close. Some families rely on bodies pressed together, others on straw, wool, or niches built into the walls. And in this cottage, it is courtains, simple fabrics turned into shelter that hold back the winter until morning. The traveler walks toward the northern edge of the village, where the cottages begin to thin out and the small animal shelters stand closer to the fields. The cold grows sharper with each step, pressing into his cloak and stiffening the air around him. He can smell hay before he reaches the next home, a dry, earthy scent that cuts through the frozen wind. It is followed by a faint warmth that animals alone can create, the kind that gathers slowly in enclosed barns through the steady breath of living bodies. The cottage ahead is connected directly to a long, low barn built from timber beams darkened by age. A soft golden light spills from its open doorway. The traveler walks closer, boots crunching in the deep snow. As he reaches the entrance, a wave of warm, humid air pushes out to greet him, carrying the scents of straw, wool, earth, and livestock. He steps inside and closes the door behind him. The barn is dim but comfortably warm compared to the night outside. The warmth is not from a fire. There is no hearth here, but from the gathered heat of animals resting in their stalls. The cow shifts its weight, letting out a long, low sigh that rolls through the air. A pair of goats lie pressed together in a corner, their steady breathing filling the space with gentle warmth. Chickens roost on a wooden beam overhead, their soft feathers puffed against the cold. The family who lives here has arranged their sleeping area along one side of the barn, close enough to feel the warmth, but far enough from the animals to keep the bedding clean. A small straw mattress lies on a raised wooden platform. Several wool blankets rest on top, neatly folded. A lantern hangs above, giving the area a soft glow. A man stands beside the cow, adjusting the rope that keeps it in place. He looks over at the traveler and nods in greeting. His hands move confidently as he checks the animal's bedding, pressing the straw with his boots to ensure it stays dry and warm. The traveler steps closer to the cow. The animal's breath curls into the air like warm mist. Its hide radiates a steady heat, enough that the traveler feels it from a full step away. The cow's eyes close slowly, disturbed neither by the cold nor by the visitor. The traveler understands why families sometimes sleep in barns. Even a single large animal can warm an entire space more effectively than a weak winter fire. The man gestures toward the wooden platform where the family sleeps. He explains that on nights like this, when the cold is deep and the firewood is scarce, they move from the cottage into the barn. The barn stays warm longer. The animals provide natural heat without risk of extinguishing. The traveler nods. It is a practical, time-tested choice. The woman of the house emerges from a small door that leads to the cottage kitchen. She carries a wool blanket draped over her arm. 2 children follow her, rubbing sleep from their eyes. She spreads the blanket across the mattress and checks the bedding beneath, shaking out a few stray pieces of hay. The traveler watches as the children settle onto the mattress. The goats, sensing movement, lift their heads briefly, but soon return to their quiet rest. The chickens cluck softly, shifting their feet along the beam. The barn has its own rhythm, one shaped by slow breaths and gentle movements. The woman explains that the animals grow accustomed to sharing the space with the family. In return, the family keeps the barn warm, clean, and free of drafts. It is a respectful balance, one of necessity, not convenience. The traveler walks to the stall where the sheep rests on a thick layer of straw. Its wool coat traps heat so efficiently that the air surrounding the animal feels noticeably warmer. The traveler places a hand near the sheep's side, feeling the temperature shift. The sheep stirs and turns its head slightly, giving him a slow, placid blink. Nearby, the man begins checking the barn seams, pressing his fingers along the wooden planks. He knows exactly where the drafts usually creep through. He picks up a bundle of dried moss and stuffs it into a narrow crack between 2 beams. The movement is quick, practiced. The barn must stay sealed if the family is to sleep comfortably. The traveler understands how important these small tasks are. Winter demands attention to details that summer would never reveal. The woman sits beside the children and begins arranging the blankets. She spreads one thick wool, covering over their bodies, then tucks a second blanket along the sides to keep out the cold air. The children snuggle into the warmth, their breaths soft and even. One of the goats bleats quietly, and the younger child, already drifting toward sleep, smiles without opening their eyes. The animal's presence is not unsettling. It is familiar, almost comforting. Their sounds become part of the nightly atmosphere. The traveler sits on a small stool near the stall. The heat of the barn settles around him gently. It feels different from the warmth of a fire, less sharp, more steady. He listens to the rhythmic chewing of the goats, the cow's long exhale, the rustle of straw when an animal shifts position. All of it blends into a kind of quiet harmony. The man finishes securing the barn door and joins his family. He sits on the platform and removes his boots, shaking off a bit of hay. The woman lifts the blanket to give him space. The children instinctively move closer to make room for their parents. Before lying down, the man walks to the cow one last time, placing his hand on the animal's side. He checks its breathing, strokes its neck, and whispers something soft enough that only the cow could hear. The traveler cannot make out the words, but the gesture reveals a deep familiarity. In winter, warmth from an animal means survival, and survival builds bonds. The man returns and crawls beneath the blankets. The woman settles beside him, and together their warmth merges with the already heated space created by the animals nearby. The lantern flickers gently overhead. The traveler watches The family gradually falls still. The barn settles too, the animals relaxing, the air warming further from the collected breath of humans and livestock. The walls creak softly as wind presses against them, but inside the barn the cold is held at bay. The traveler resists quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping family or the animals. He moves toward the door, pushing it open just enough to slip through. The moment he steps outside, the sharp cold stings his skin again. His breath escapes in a cloud, and he pulls his cloak tighter. Behind him, the barn holds its warmth, a small sanctuary of shared heat, leave-in bodies, and quiet cooperation. He walks back, toward the village lane, listening to the wind sweep across the fields. Another home waits ahead, another way in which people endure winter through creativity, instinct, and resilience. The traveler continues on, ready to discover whatever warmth remains hidden in the night. The traveler walks toward the center of the village, where the cottages gradually give way to stone structures. The air here feels slightly different, colder in some ways, because stone holds the chill, but also steadier, less vulnerable to the sudden drafts that creep through timber walls. Ahead, the largest building in the settlement rises with quiet authority. The great hall, even from outside, the traveler can hear the low hum of voices and the occasional clatter of a pot or cup. Warm light dances behind the narrow windows. The sound of a heavy door closing sends a muffled thud through the thick winter air. He approaches the entrance and pushes the door open. Heat rushes toward him, immediately not the soft warmth of a cottage hearth or the steady breath of animals, but the sprawling, open warmth of a fire large enough to serve dozens. A massive hearth dominates the wall opposite the entrance. Flames climb steadily up the stones, crackling with a confidence that smaller homes cannot afford. 2 logs as thick as a man's leg burn brightly, their edges glowing deep orange. The great hole is long and high-ceiled. Wooden beams arch overhead like the ribs of a ship. The walls are hung with heavy tapestries that depict hunts, feasts, and landscapes. Their colors have faded, but their thickness serves a more practical purpose, blocking drafts from the exterior stone. Near the fire, several workers rest on benches. Some sit quietly with cups of weak ale, their faces soft by the day's exhaustion. Others mend clothing, polish tools, or simply warm their hands. A few children lie curled beneath cloaks near the base of the hearth, their cheeks pink from the heat. A steward approaches the traveler with a polite nod. He gestures for him to come closer to the fire, where the air is warmest. The traveler follows, feeling the shift in temperature with every step. The heat here is powerful enough to dry damp boots and warm cold bones. It radiates outward in steady waves, filling the hole's center with a comfortable glow. One of the workers sets down his knife and explains that the fire in the great hall rarely extinguishes in winter. It is fed carefully throughout the day, and at night the embers are banked to ensure they survive until morning. The hole needs constant warmth not only for people, but for everything stored here. Grains, tools, wooden beams, and anything that winter might damage. The traveler turns his attention to the high table at the far end of the room. A few members of the household staff sit there, eating a simple meal of bread and pot. The lord of the manor is not present. He is set to stay in his private chambers during winter nights, but the staff remains active, keeping the hall's routines moving, even after the day's work is done. A group of servants spreads fresh rushes across the floor, mixing them with dried herbs to mask smells and soften footsteps. As they scatter the rushes, the faint scents of thyme and mint drift into the warm air, blending with the smoke and the lingering aromas of dinner. The traveler moves along the length of the hole, observing the small tasks carried out with quiet coordination. A young boy uses a wooden paddle to push a heavy pot closer to the fire. The cook, standing nearby, checks its contents and nods approval. Another servant folds a wool cloak and places it on a bench near the fire, too warm before someone uses it for sleep. The traveler notes how many people choose to sleep in the great hall during winter. It is not a place of luxury or privacy, but warmth is more important than either. Several pallets made from straw and wool blankets lie in the corners. Those who sleep here are workers, travelers, or anyone in need of protection from the cold night air. He walks toward one such pallet, where a man sharpens a small knife by candlelight. The man pauses long enough to nod in greeting, then resumes his task. A small cup of ale sits beside him, warming near the candle's flame. The traveler senses that this corner, toque simple, is a place of routine comfort. On the far side of the hall, closer to the entrance, the cooler air returns. The traveler can feel the temperature drop as he steps away from the fire. Drafts sweep along the floor despite the thick rushes. A servant carefully adjusts a tapestry hanging from the wall, ensuring it lies flat so no cold air slips past it. He glances upward at the rafters. Shadows move across the beams as the fire flickers. The ceiling is high, allowing smoke to rise toward the hood that channels it outward. Even so, a faint haze of smoke lingers in the upper air, a reminder of how heavily the hall relies on its hearth. The steward returns and invites the traveler to join him at a bench near the fire. The traveler accepts, settling onto the wooden seat. The warmth spreads through his cloak and into his shoulders, easing the chill that has clung to him since he stepped outside the barn. The steward explains that the Great Hall serves as a kind of winter heart for the community. People gather here for warmth, meals, and safety. The fire becomes a central pillar for everyone who does not have enough wood or strong enough walls of their own. On especially harsh nights, even villagers who live in nearby cottages will bring their children here to sleep on the floor. As the steward speaks, a gust of wind rattles the hall's outer door. The sound echoes, but the warmth remains steady. The tapestries barely shift. The fire does not falter. The traveler watches a few more people settle onto the floor for the night. They spread blankets and cloaks, and some place warmed stones at their feet. Parents tuck children beneath layers of wool, smoothing hair from their faces and adjusting blankets to keep the cold out. Despite the size of the hull, the warmth gathers most strongly near the hearth. People cluster close, forming loose circles of quiet conversation or shared rest. The traveler listens to their voices, blend with the background sounds, the crackling logs, the clink of pottery, the faint rustle of straw. The atmosphere is calm, steady, and reassuring. Winter still presses against the walls, but inside the hall, there is a sense of collective A servant lowers the lanterns one by one, dimming the hall toward rest. Only the fire remains bright. The flames shift from orange to deeper red, casting long shadows across the floor. The steward bids the traveler good night and moves to check the fire one last time. He places a fresh log among the embers, but not directly into the flames. It will catch slowly, feeding the fire through the long stretch of night. The traveler rises, absorbing the warmth one final time. The hole feels like a refuge built not only for shelter, but for the shared strength of everyone inside. He steps toward the door, pulling it open carefully. A rush of cold air sweeps in, sharp and immediate. Behind him, the great hole continues its quiet vigil, the fire burning steadily as he slips back into the frozen night. The traveler closes the door behind him and walks on, guided by the memory of the warmth lingering in his cloak. The traveler leaves the great hall, the warmth still clinging faintly to his cloak, and steps back into the deep winter night. The village lies in near total silence now. The late hours have settled, that quiet stretch when most people sleep and only a handful remain awake out of necessity. He walks along the hardened path, noticing how the cold feels different at this hour, sharper, more settled, almost expectant. Ahead, a dim lantern flickers. Its glow sways gently as someone moves through the snow. The traveler approaches and soon recognizes a figure wrapped tightly in a thick wool cloak. The man carries a small bundle of sticks under one arm and holds the lantern high enough to see the ground ahead. He is one of the night watchers. The man greets the traveler quietly. His voice carries the calm steadiness of someone who has spent many winter nights walking through the darkness. He explains that while most villagers sleep, a few remain awake in shifts to tend fires, check for dangers, and make sure the village remains safe until sunrise. The traveler walks with him. Their steps press slowly into the crusted snow as the man points toward a cottage where smoke barely rises from the chimney. He explains that elderly couples, small families, and those who struggle to keep their fires going often receive help at night. A few sticks of wood, shared from neighbors or from the manor's winter store, can make the difference between a warm dawn and a dangerously cold night. They approach the cottage. The night watcher kneels beside a small wooden box near the door. Inside are a few pieces of dry kindling. He adds his own sticks to the pile, checking that it will be enough for the family inside to warm their hearth when they wake. He doesn't knock or disturb them. The gesture is quiet and familiar, part of the village's unspoken understanding that winter requires shared effort. Aste Muba, on the traveler, notices how the cold deepens near the open spaces between cottages. Wind slips through the gaps, carrying snow in thin, swirling sheets. The night watcher pulls his cloak tighter around himself. Despite the lantern's glow, the darkness ahead seems endless, but his steps remain steady. They stop near a house where the faint glow of embers flickers behind the window. The man explains that inside lives a mother with 2 young children, her husband away working for a distant manor. She struggles to keep the fire burning through the long nights. He listens at the door for a moment, then nods. The fire still whispers steadily. No need to wake her. They continue walking. Near the edge of the village, another figure emerges from the darkness, a woman carrying a small bucket of water covered with cloth to prevent freezing. She nods to the traveler and the night watcher. She's returning from checking the animals in her barn, making sure none are distressed by the cold. Some nights, animals become restless, and their movements can reveal a broken latch, a loose board, or a fox lurking nearby. Winter demands vigilance from everyone. The traveler watches as she disappears into her cottage, her lantern dimming behind the door. The man leads the traveler toward a small square where the well sits. A layer of frost covers the stones, and the bucket hangs stiffly from its rope. The well isn't used for drawing water tonight. It would freeze before reaching home, but it must still be checked. Wells can crack in deep cold, and a broken well in winter can become a crisis. The man kneels and presses his hand along the stones. Satisfied, he stands again. They continue through the square, and the traveler notices another figure walking slowly along the far side of the lane. A young boy, no more than 12, carries a long stick and a small pouch. He pauses at each doorway, tapping the stick lightly against the wooden threshold. The traveler asks about it. The night watcher explains that the boy is checking for signs of snow piling against doors. If too much gathers, people may wake trapped inside their homes. It's a small task, but it prevents real danger. The traveler watches the boy brush snow away from a doorway, then move on without waiting for thanks. The night watcher leads him next to the farthest cottage on the edge of the fields. The wind is harsher here, sweeping across open land without anything to slow it. The family inside sleeps lightly, their fire weak after a difficult harvest season. The man sets his lantern on a small post and places a larger bundle of kindling near their door. Tomorrow, they will know someone watched over them. Before leaving, he checks the roof. Heavy snow can break beams if it accumulates too quickly. He uses his stick to tap along the edge, listening for any sign of stress in the wood. They walk again, and the traveler feels the deep quiet settle more fully around them. It is not an empty quiet, but a working one filled with the soft sounds of vigilance. The crunch of their boots, the faint rattle of a shutter, the low sigh of wind slipping through narrow alleys. The man explains that in some winters, the night watchers not only checked fires and doors, but also patrolled for wolves. Though rare, wolves sometimes wander close during harsh seasons, desperate for any sign of food. The man gestures toward the fields beyond the village, where the snow glistens untouched. He says he once saw tracks there at dawn. They reach a small cottage where the fire has nearly died. The night watcher pauses, listening at the window. The traveler hears nothing. No crackling, no low hum of heat. The man considers for a moment, then knocks softly. After a delay, an elderly man opens the door, wrapped in a blanket. The night watcher hands him a small bundle of sticks and gestures toward the hearth. The older man nods gratefully, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He invites the traveler and the night watcher inside only briefly, long enough for them to see the faint sparks still clinging beneath the ash. With the new wood, the man will coax them back to life. They step outside again, closing the door quietly. The traveler follows the night watcher toward the heart of the village once more. The lantern's flame begins to dim as the oil runs low, but the man does not rush. He explains that dawn is only a few hours away, and his shift will end when the first light touches the snow. They walk slowly, the cold tightening around them in its final display of strength before morning. The traveler notices how the village seems to breathe beneath the frost fires kept alive. Doors cleared, animals tended, worries eased by quiet acts of care. As they approach the watcher's home, The man turns to the traveler and speaks softly. Winter, he says, is something no one survives alone. Every night is a shared effort, families relying on each other, neighbors stepping in where needed, even children doing their part. The cold tests everyone, but it also binds them in a way that warmer seasons rarely require. He lifts the lantern once more, giving the traveler a respectful nod before disappearing inside. The traveler stands alone in the lane. The village is silent again, its people resting safely behind their doors, their warmth preserved by a chain of unseen hands. He takes a breath, watching it drift into the air, and continues walking through the dark, ready for what the next hour of night will reveal. The traveler walks alone now, following the narrow lane that curves past the last row of cottages. The night has reached its most unforgiving stretch hour, when even the embers in every hearth burn low, when frost thickens across every surface, and when the cold becomes as still and absolute as stone. This is the hour villagers dread most, the hour that tests every blanket, every sealed window, every strip of wool hung over a door. He stops for a moment, listening. The village is silent, not the gentle quiet of early evening, but the deep, heavy quiet that winter creates when the air is so cold it seems to hold its breath. Even the wind has eased, as though it too has grown weary. The traveler continues on, his boots crunching through snow that has hardened into a brittle crust. Each step echoes faintly between the cottages, the sound sharper than it was earlier in the night. The cold has settled into everything: the wood, the earth, even the traveler's cloak. It presses against his skin, unable to be ignored, a constant reminder of winter's grip. He approaches a cottage with a sagging thatched roof. Its windows are dark, but thin smoke threads upward from the chimney, swirling slowly in the moonlight. The traveler steps closer and listens at the door. A faint crackle comes from within the whisper of a hearth, performing its final work before dawn. He lifts the latch and slips inside. The room is dim, lit only by the faint glow of embers. A family lies clustered beneath blankets, their sleeping breath steady but shallow. The fire has nearly died. Only a small pocket of coals still warms the air. The traveler watches the mother stir slightly, shifting the blanket over her youngest child, Ibenin Slee. Her instinct knows the cold is tightening outside. The traveler quietly kneels beside the hearth and moves a few embers together with a stick. They glow brighter for a moment, sending out a brief wave of heat. He doesn't add wood. This is not his home, but he respects the simple act of helping the embers last a little longer until the family wakes. He slips out silently, returning to the bitter air. A soft light gleams from the next cottage. The traveler moves toward it, drawn by the faint movement behind the shutter. As he approaches, he hears a man's voice, low and steady, whispering something inside. Not words, exactly, but a hum meant to soothe the child who must have awakened from the cold. He enters quietly. The father sits upright in bed, the child curled against his chest, beneath thick blankets. The mother sleeps beside them, exhausted from the demands of winter nights. The traveler observes how the father gently rubs the child's back, keeping the little one warm with his own body. A wool cap covers the child's head, and a thin wisp of breath escapes with each exhale. The father nods to the traveler in silent acknowledgement. No words are exchanged. Words would feel too heavy for this hour. The traveler steps back and returns to the lane. He walks toward a cottage near the well, where thin ice glitters across the wooden door. Frost has formed delicate patterns across the surface, almost like branching vines. The traveler brushes his fingers lightly across the design. The cold is sharp enough to sting. Inside this cottage, no glow comes from the hearth. The traveler's concern rises. He knocks gently. After a moment, the door opens a crack. An elderly woman stands, wrapped in layers of wool, her breath curling into the night air. She recognizes the traveler from earlier in the evening and gives him a small, grateful smile. She explains quietly that her fire went out earlier than expected. She had not wanted to disturb the night watchers with her worry. The traveler asks no permission but steps inside to look at the hearth. Only thin ash remains. The woman apologizes for the state of it, but the traveler shakes his head. Winter embers die quickly, especially when the wood is poor or damp. He gathers what little dry straw she has kept near the wall and arranges it beside the few remaining bits of half-burned wood. He strikes the flint she offers him, sending sparks into the straw. After several attempts, a thin flame catches. Trembling like a newborn breath, he shields it with his hands until it grows enough to survive on its own. When the flame finally rises, the woman places a hand over her heart, relieved. She thanks him quietly. The traveler nods once and steps back outside. The cold meets him again, harsher now for having felt warmth. He continues walking, following the path around the outer cottages. The sky begins to shift slightly still dark, but with the faintest hint of blue pressed low along the horizon. Dawn is still distant, but the coldest hour has begun to loosen its grip just enough for the traveler to feel the promise of light. He passes a barn where animals shift softly inside. Even though he is outside, he can hear their breaths, a comforting reminder that warmth exists even in this frozen moment. Further ahead, another cottage shows a crack of light beneath the door. The traveler steps closer. He hears quiet voices, soft laughter, even surprising for this hour. He enters carefully. Inside, a young couple sits close to the hearth. The fire is small but alive. They've woken early, perhaps unable to sleep in the height of the cold. Choosing instead to tend the fire together, they make small adjustments, nudging logs into place, keeping the flame bright for when the children rise. Their laughter is not loud. It is the warm, tired laughter of two people who know winter deeply, but meet it with quiet resilience. The traveler watches them for a moment, appreciating the calm of this rare scene. He leaves them undisturbed. As he walks back toward the village center, he hears the faint creak of a shutter lifting. A man peeks out, checking the sky for the first sign of morning. The traveler gives a small nod, and the man nods back. Neither speaks. Words seem unnecessary now. The horizon brightens slightly, spreading a pale glow across the snow. The cold eases just enough that the traveler feels it shift from biting to merely persistent. Windows begin to stir with movement. Children turn beneath blankets. Dogs stretch and shake frost from their fur. Embers glow a little brighter as families begin to poke them awake. The village rises slowly, as though climbing out of the deepest part of winter's hold. The traveler stands at the center of the lane and watches as the faint light grows. He can smell the first signs of morning fire smoke, lifting gently from chimneys, rich with the scent of waking life. The coldest hour has passed. And with it, the village enters another winter disquiet, resilient and warmed by the small axe that carried it through the night. The traveler stands in the center of the village lane as the horizon slowly shifts from deep blue to a faint, muted gray. It is not yet sunrise, but the darkness has loosened its hold. The cold remains steady, but something in the air has changed. The traveler senses it immediately, the subtle lifting that comes before dawn. He begins walking again, boots pressing into snow that has grown softer on the surface. Frost still clings to every roof, every fence post, every branch, but now the ice glitters faintly, reflecting the slow arrival of morning light. The village feels fragile and quiet, like a place holding its breath before its first exhale of the day. He approaches the first cottage, where a thin column of smoke rises from the chimney. Inside, he hears the soft stirring of a family beginning to wake, the faint clatter of firewood, the rustle of wool, blankets being pushed aside, the tired sighs of adults who know another cold day lies ahead. Winter mornings demand effort, and the first task for every home is always the same: revive the fire. The traveler steps inside. The family he visited earlier, the ones who slept together in a tight cluster to share warmth, are rising slowly. The father crouches at the hearth, coaxing the embers with careful breath. The mother helps the children into their wool layers, pulling caps over their sleepy heads. The fire sparks weakly at first, then catches more confidently. Its orange glow spreads through the room, pushing the cold back inch by inch. The traveler nods to them and slips back outside, letting the warmth remain theirs. Further down the lane, another cottage door opens. A man steps out, lifting his shoulders against the cold. His breath drifts in two long clouds before he closes the door behind him and walks toward the woodpile. Each movement is slow, deliberate. Frost crunches under his boots, He selects a few thin sticks and returns to the house to warm the morning air for his family. The traveler watches him and continues walking. Near to well, he hears the faint sound of a broom sweeping snow away from a doorway. A woman clears a path for her children, who will soon venture outside for chores. Her breath fogs the air, but her movements are steady, practiced. Winter mornings do not grant time for hesitation. The traveler heads toward the edge of the village, where the barns sit near the fields. Inside the largest barn, animals stir with the first hints of daylight. A cow stretches its neck, letting out a low, warm breath. Goats shift, their hooves rustling the straw. Chickens hop lightly along their roosting beam, their feathers puffed and bright in the faint light. Their warmth has kept the barn comfortable through the night, and now they prepare to begin their own routines. The family who slept here rises quietly. The parents fold their blankets, shaking out bits of straw. The children rub their eyes and stretch their arms, still wrapped in the warmth left by the animals. The traveler watches, as the father checks the cow's water bucket still unfrozen, thanks to the animal's heat. He nods with satisfaction. The traveler steps outside again. The horizon brightens another shade, a pale silver now. The outlines of the fields begin to appear. Rows of frozen earth, coated in frost, stretch out toward the woods. Smoke lifts from more chimneys than before. The village is waking. He walks toward the larger house where the featherbed rests behind shuttered windows. Inside, he finds the family beginning to stir. The mother folds the edge of the quilt back. The daughter rubs her eyes. The father sits upright on the soft mattress, the warmth still thick around him. He rises slowly and moves to the hearth to start the morning fire. The traveler steps out quietly, leaving them to their comfort. As he moves along the lane, he hears a door creak open behind him. The elderly woman from the night before steps outside, wrapped in several layers of wool. She offers the traveler a grateful smile, the kind that expresses more than words. Her fire, now revived, glows behind her. She breathes in the cold air, relieved to greet another morning. The traveler nods gently and continues walking. Near the far end of the village, the sleeping niche cottage waits. Inside, the wooden enclosure remains warm, sealed tightly against the cold. The family inside has not yet risen. Their breaths create a soft rhythm behind the closed curtain. The traveler watches the father stir slightly, opening the niche just enough to check the morning light creeping into the room. He adjusts the wool curtain again and lies back down for a few more minutes of warmth before facing the day. The traveler leaves them undisturbed. He heads toward the great hall. When he enters, he finds the large fire already revived. A servant adds new logs, their ends hissing softly as they meet the embers. A few workers sit nearby, rubbing warmth into their hands. One child wakes near the hearth, stretching in the rising heat. The echoes of the hall feel larger now as everyone prepares for the morning's duties. The steward approaches the traveler and greets him with a respectful nod. He explains that the hall's fire must stay strong today. The cold outside is too deep for it to falter. The traveler listens, knowing the great hall remains the heartbeat of the village through the coldest months. He steps back outside just as the sun begins to brush the sky with its first touch of pale gold. Light spills slowly over the rooftops. The frost glows briefly, turning cottages and fences into shimmering outlines. The village, which felt so fragile in the darkness, now seems stronger, held together by fire, wool, straw, stone, and the quiet perseverance of its people. The traveler walks to the highest point in the lane to watch. Doors open one by one. Children step outside with pails. Men carry tools toward barns or fields. Women shake blankets in the cold air to brush off the frost. Smoke rises steadily from every chimney now, each column glowing faintly in the new light. Winter has not loosened its hold, not yet. The cold remains sharp, the wind still threatens, and the nights will continue to demand effort and care. But dawn has returned, and with it, the quiet promise that the village will endure another day. The traveler pulls his cloak tight one last time. He looks across the settlement. He has walked through all night its sleeping clusters, its straw beds, its wool-draped walls, its barns warmed by animals, its curtains shielding families from drafts, its niches carved from wood, its great hall burning bright and steady. He takes a slow breath and steps forward, ready for whatever road lies beyond the village. Behind him, the people rise to meet the day, carrying with them the same simple strength that carried them through the night, and winter unforgiving though it may be will find them prepared. And so, as dawn settles quietly across the village and the cold begins to ease its hold, we come to the end of our long winter journey. You've walked beside the traveler through sleeping cottages, warm barns, shared beds, wool-draped walls, and fires that never quite stopped glowing. Through every gentle detail, the night has slowly given way to morning. Thank you for joining me tonight, here at Go to Sleep Historian. If this peaceful story helped you unwind, I'd be grateful if you subscribed, left a calm like, and shared a thought or two below. It helps our little village grow. The spoken story ends here, but the relaxing music will continue, so you can drift deeper into rest. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next quiet journey.